Tēnā koutou katoa, kia ora and welcome to another Manuanui live stream. My name is Simon and today we are joined alongside Herman from Harikoa Life. Herman has been on the live stream a few times over the years. He is the founder and CEO of an organisation that is looking to transform the way we house and include disabled people in the community, with a really inclusive model that we don't see currently in New Zealand. So we are really happy to have him here to talk about what he's trying to achieve and some of the updates he has for us around a pilot project that is very close to breaking ground and becoming something real for families in the North Auckland, Rodney area. So I'm really excited to welcome Herman to today's live stream. Herman, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Simon. And yes, thank you again for the opportunity and also for your time and for the time for people listening to this today. Yes, I'm looking forward to it, and it's been nice to do a bit of an update. It's been a while since we last spoke. Quite a lot of things have happened. But yes, it'd be nice to have a chat again. You want me to start with a bit of an overview, Simon, of what it is that we do?
Simon speaking. Yes, please. Yeah, give us a bit of a summary for those people who may not have watched the last live streams, and then we can get into today's content.
Okay, thank you. To start with, we've got a daughter with disability ourselves, and as parents, we started to realize, but as we are starting to perhaps age, the options, we're very concerned of what the options are for our daughter with disability when we're no longer around. And that increasingly became a problem when we started looking around to say, but who can really provide a total suite of services? I come from a sector development background, and I then started talking to the government, to many of the disability support organizations, to parents on a national level as well, to start understanding what is it that we need. How can we provide quality of life for a person going ahead? Because at the moment, the sector as it is extremely fragmented. And for any parent, it's sometimes a nightmare to try and navigate what to do. For a child with disability, it's very often much worse. And we just realized as parents, we need to do something else. So we started with Harikoa. And Harikoa is therefore a parent and family-driven initiative to provide quality of life for a person that looks after, the few sort of the spectrum of things that needs to happen, which includes housing. Housing is one of that, but it's also the community services, the connection services, also looking at financial viability and so forth. So I'm going to go through a little bit in detail through what it is that we do, Simon, but with your permission, I can perhaps just briefly mention for people that's been on, that's heard what we're busy with, just a quick update of some of the changes. When we last spoke quite a few months ago, we were looking at more in a type of an apartment building concept to say, yes, if you have a number of people now, inclusive housing means that you actually mix people with disability into the normal community. Now, when we started with this, we were actually looking more at the urban models, particularly overseas, but in New Zealand, feedback from parents was we actually want to do more from a housing perspective. So let's look at rather the creation of houses within the community. When we last spoke also, we were talking more about just purely ownership, that people can buy their own units, but we've increasingly starting to move also towards a rental model. Many people just simply can't afford it, or just their situation is different. But we're also starting to broaden this to look at more high care or complex care people. Initially, it was more at the easier end of disability, but we're finding a lot of people are saying, but I've got the similar issue. Can we rather also look at a solution set for them? And I'll talk through that a little bit with it. But since our last discussion also is that we're working very much as a community of like-minded organizations. So for instance, working with Laura Ferguson Trust, they've got about 140 million pipeline of construction projects. organizations like Autism New Zealand and so forth. And the reason why we work with as a network of organizations is because offering a life, a meaningful life, actually, it takes quite a few people to tap dance together. But we're now at the point also where we're starting to look at property in the Warkworth Rodney area, and that we're doing some research as well. And I'm particularly interested in some of the people logging into this to do some research to understand exactly what is it that you're looking for. So although we cannot cater for it now, let's at least understand it perhaps in future and see how things are going. So that's just an update, but I was wondering, I can perhaps go to the slide, that dark slide with the wheel, and just quickly explain what it is that we do in total.
Simon speaking. Yes, 1 second while I get that up on the screen for everybody. Okay. And yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so we're looking at this from, we're looking at 4 perspectives of the things. What are the things that we needed to do well, or need to do well to deliver long-term quality of life? Also spend quite a bit of time overseas, look at what works and what doesn't work. And you're probably aware that, systemically, we've got, as I mentioned earlier, the current state is we've got a highly fragmented sector, but yet we need to look at this of saying, what are the things that we need to do well? One of that is housing. And housing, I don't need to say to anyone that housing at the moment is a bit of a crisis. We have people, older people leaving, or about to go into retirement, yet a child with disability. And we've got hundreds of people in a somewhat desperate state within it. So the first part of this is housing, but here we're looking at that housing is one of the key things that also gives quality of life. If you've got your own place, then you actually, there's a level of dignity to it. You can invite people to your place. You feel proud for where you live. You create your own environment. So there we're looking at that. Instead of everyone trying to do it themselves, is that we can offer a portfolio of properties. So as a person through their life changes, then they can actually move to other places as well. Then that being one of the key focus areas. The one other one then is the issue of connection services. Having a house is fine, but you actually want to be part of a community. You want to have your own natural friends as well. And one of the first things that we're starting with, even in the Rodney area, before we even put the first spade into the ground, is to, as a community, to start saying, let's look at the connection services. Let's start working together. Let's find people with common interest, and that we can create that. And very often that connection is not only for the child with disability, but very often you've got very lonely parents that have spent their lives looking after their child with disability in a similar situation. The third leg then is a disability support. Now, we are not going to provide disability support, but we act on behalf of parents to engage with organizations so that we can actually have the benefits of scale, we can negotiate better, and also that we can bring in the expertise of being able to understand how do we get the most value out of the system as well. There's a huge difference between someone that knows how to work or how the system works and someone else who doesn't, and it's not, and to some extent it may be a little bit unfair, but that's just the reality. If you know how the system works, know what to ask for, how to ask for that, but also the administration is, and I think that's, for instance, the proposed relationship also with yourself is to say, let's see if we can make the administration a lot easier. So that's the third leg. And the last leg is perhaps an interesting one that many people don't expect, but that's the financial aspect, where we are looking at setting up a fund, and the fund then owns the properties on behalf of the families. But then the fund starts acting as a long-term savings mechanism as well. So, at the moment, money goes in and money goes out. Everything is short-term. But the risk to us as parents is that what happens in 20 years if there's no funding mechanism, if there's no ability to do that? Now, there's obviously some discussions to say, how do we best do that in a way that, it is also in line with some of the work and income policies and so forth. But it gives you hope for the future. At the moment, there's a huge amount of concern about the financial side, for people with disability and those families. And the reality is, and it's a hard reality, is that as parents as well as children with disability very often spiral into poverty if we don't take care of them. So it's one of our key focus areas. So on the housing side, and Simon, if you don't mind, just going to the housing slide there. So what we're doing is we've got working also with, for instance, Laura Ferguson Trust. The core design that we're looking for from a housing side is where we typically have 4 people living in one house. It's just one home, but everyone has his own pod, if I can call it that. We call it the 4-leaf clover model. So each person has his own lounge, his own kitchen, but also his own bathroom, and obviously his bedroom. But we can put these together in different ways, and I think we call it sometimes it's just a model that fits into one another, and the layout can be different. But the aim of that is that a person has their own place as well, to say this is my place, and particularly with people with autism and so forth, that to say you want your own place, you want some peace and quiet as well, to say this is my area. However, I live in an environment where there's 3 other people typically as well. Now, some of the other people can be support workers to come and provide support in the same time. But we have found from international studies that as soon as you put too many people with disability in one property, then the rest of the community starts seeing that as, oh, that's a place for disabled people, and they don't integrate within that. So it's actually good to have that type of model that, and we have some of those, but yet we also have a central office so that people can come to a community hall and also have a sense of belonging within that. Where you do find with people with more complex care, where they find it difficult to engage with the community, it sometimes just makes more cost-wise, makes more sense to put perhaps 4 of those properties together, because you then also have it's a better way of serving and working with support workers, gives them also a sense of belonging of where they live. And that's, for instance, where we're going from from a housing model side. If you can go to the next slide, and if I can just quickly, and I'm going through this very quickly, but just to give a sense for that. But the next slide is then more a little bit about the rental or ownership models. When we started off, we initially looked at this much more from an ownership model, to say you actually, and the parents need to fork out all the money. So if you want to live in one of the units, you need to put all the money up front. But increasingly, and because it's so hard financially for people with disability and the families, many people came to us and said, but can I rather rent a place? And we started to learn that there's actually, and what we need to look at here is an option, because yes, most people want to have the security of ownership, but how do we progressively help people to get there? So on the one hand, on the slide on the right-hand side is, yes, if you want to put, if you've got the funding, and some people do have that type of funding, particularly people who sort of now, they at the stage where all the siblings have left home and they say, well, what am I going to do with my property? They can invest in that, and that means it gives you security or certainty of mind to say, yes, I'm, my child with disability is sorted. Yet on the other side of the spectrum, if you only want to rent, if there are properties available, you can do so. But we are looking at a way then to saying, as we actually generate surplus on behalf of families as well, let's see if we can channel that back into ownership as well. So over a period of time, we can actually build ownership for people. And personally, I strongly believe in that. So that's part of the design, the changes as well. But if you want to go to the next slide, that's more the pie chart. The financial mechanism behind that we're putting now up also with fund managers is to set up a fund working with our partner organizations as well, like for instance Laura Ferguson Trust and Autism New Zealand and so forth, where the aim is then to have a single fund that gives us the scale. It allows us to build on scale so we can actually drive the cost down significantly. And it also then brings, so it's much better value for money. But because we have a larger fund from a risk perspective, if one unit, something happens, there's, for instance, there's flooding or so forth, we can share the risk across the whole fund. It just gives us a much more security, and it also allows us to manage this more effectively because we can invest more securely, we can maintain the property portfolio better. But this gives us the strength to work together as a community rather than each one trying to do his own thing. So that's some of the changes and where we're going with Harikoa. If you want to just a last slide of where we're driving things now or where we're aiming for. And that is particularly now in it's the Walk with Rodney area. So we're starting to look for properties now, and that's both for properties for sort of a few units, but it is a launch area as well for the rest of Auckland. Now, we believe that the amount of homes, if we do this well, is in the Auckland area alone, we can probably set up about 500 or serve between 500 and 1,000 families. That's not just ourselves, that's other partner organizations. As I mentioned, Laura Ferguson, they're already looking at about $140 million of properties there. But we believe that there's a significant need for this. In fact, even the government has spoken about the tidal wave of people with disability living at this stage with parents having to actually be accommodated in something else. And that's typically the baby boomer generation that's now in a way checking out. And we've got a major dilemma there. So we're starting to look for properties for certain for those, and that's sometimes somewhat elderly people with disability. It's also a case that we need to work quite closely with the people leaving school. Very often, while people are at school, there's a lot of social things happening, but after school, there's very often a cliff face, and that's when the pressure goes up significantly. So we need to start helping people from that stage already to be able to go into different trajectories so they actually start living much more full lives than being forced to go and live in a home environment. So yes, part of the first thing we're doing now is looking for properties. The other side is then the discussions and the research. So as I mentioned, we really want to talk to people in the Rodney, Northern Auckland area to say, what are your needs? And let's make sure we can cater for that. The research is sponsored also by Foundation North. So there's no particular cost involved in that, and will probably take about an hour. But it's crucial for us to really get to know where you are now. And it's not a case that you want to move in, but if we know over a period of time, this is where you probably want to go to, then we can start catering for that. So it is a phase design approach, knowing who needs what and who by when. But it also goes hand in hand with the family development side. So frankly, in most cases, people are not ready to just say, yes, I want to move out of home and move into a new place. There is some development. There's training in terms of how do you do things. And very often it's also for parents themselves to see that the child is fine, and it gives us some time because there's a function, let's call it the transfer of care, that parents need to be involved, but it allows them to slowly withdraw as well, and that someone can take the role over within that. The operational mechanism, the way we manage this is we build actually a small team around each person with disability that over a period of time intimately starts to know what works and what doesn't work, so that parents and siblings can start withdrawing from that. As I mentioned with this as well, Simon, even before we put the first spade into the ground, is to start with some of the other services for people to get to know one another. The connection services, it's also that there's an opportunity to start looking for jobs for people. And we can start with that again. We don't need homes to start off with, because it takes some time to get approval for homes, but we can start operating as a community. And then, yes, once we're ready, it's a case of building and start with a journey. So yes, the invitation from my side is really to say there's something we need to do together. It's an invitation to work together. It's not always an easy ride, as we know. Nothing in disability is easy, but it's a very meaningful process. And if we can, it'd be great to work together.
Simon speaking. Thank you, Herman. It is always really a pleasure listening to you speak, because it's so obvious how passionate for this work you are. And I'm sure people who are listening to this, who haven't really been exposed to this proposal before, it must seem such a lofty goal that you're aiming for and very hard to conceive. But everybody who is exposed to it knows just how necessary it is, and how much of a positive impact it will have on disabled people to have a true place in their community with meaningful connections, with the right support in place, safety and security after their parents or their siblings have moved on. So yeah, it is something that Manawanui is very happy to support. So I guess if people are in the Auckland and Rodney area, what would you encourage them to do? How can they get involved and play their part in the next steps?
I think let's have a talk. Let's contact us. Let's have a chat. Let's set up a meeting to hear what you're looking for and what you can possibly also contribute. One of the reasons why we actually started or chose to start with the Warkworth area, actually the town of Warkworth, is actually about it's the heart of the community. They have a small community, and people with disability are accepted, and you get to know people, and everyone cares for one another. And you can see behind me, I'm here in the middle of Auckland at our offices here. It is a different culture we have in a city environment. So that's one of the reasons for doing it there. But I think, Simon, let's start with the basics. Drop us an email. Let's have a talk. And I'd be particularly interested then also to have a one-on-one discussion, particularly with the research, is to find out exactly what is it that you are interested in. With respect, virtually every family with disability is different. And it's interesting, the research that we've done so far is the lessons we've learned of how wide those needs are different. And it's very often not just the child, it's very often the family and how they want to stay connected with their child. Some people are saying, my child needs to be much more independent. Others say, I'd like to be very much part of the journey. So let's find out what it is. And thank you for the compliment of saying, it's a very meaningful endeavor. The interesting thing is, Simon, most of what we're doing here is common sense. And most of it, what we're doing is already taking place. We just need to change the way we do things a little bit. What we're talking about here, internationally as well. I think, at the moment, partly probably because the sector is not working well. We haven't kept up with some of the obvious things that we need to do. I mean, integrating. We all have a need to integrate within the community. We all have a need to have our own private place as well, where we can. We want to have friends. We want to have financial security. So, we do this all on a base. And I think we've made it extremely unnecessary complex to try and navigate the system. And it's a case of just stepping back, I think, and saying, let's do things together. And we've had some excellent support and the partners coming forward. And I think the compliment is actually for many other people in this as well, is to say, and it's people like yourself, Manawanui, the sharing of ideas, throwing things around, kicking it around, challenging things. And it's been an interesting journey, and it's nice now that we're starting with a launch, but the learning process will probably never end.
Simon speaking, exactly. And yeah, it's, just like the example of the assumption of apartment models being the preferred option, and then actually research coming to show that something closer to housing is what people preferred. Those sort of learning moments, I'm sure, will continue over time. So you said to people to contact you via email. What is your actual email for people to reach out to you?
I think they can even just drop an email, but get through to me at info@harikoa.org.nz. That would come through on that. But otherwise, have a look at the website. The website is also harikoa.org.nz. And yeah, the contact detail is there as well. But the research side is really when this gets very real. Is the discussion to say, and very often, some of the hard cases, we've had people that are at the end of their lives, and they're really desperate of saying, what can I do? And that's a bit of a more an urgent approach. But yes, that's the discussion, Simon, where this gets very, very real. And it also empowers us by the more we know about what the clients are looking for, the better discussion we can have. For instance, as I mentioned to you earlier, we just had a discussion with the Treasury, and it's an interesting concept, but I think people don't realize that we are, yes, there's a lot of money being spent in the disability sector, but very often money is not well spent. If you can put a person into a housing environment with friends and so forth, their emotional needs also drop significantly. They spend much less time going to the hospital. We know that loneliness is is extremely bad for your health, mental, physical, and everything. So by just those type of things, it actually produces a benefits case to the government as well, of saying, yes, we can actually spend less on support and rather spend that money onto something that's really of meaning. If your hobby is you want to go away for weekends or so forth, because a lot of the money, for instance, sometimes the money is just spent on having company rather than, and that there's nothing as good as natural friendships, with all respect. We actually want natural friendships. So if we do this well, it also means that the government, from a fiscal or financial perspective, also save money. And as you know, we're in the middle of the process now of the changes in the disability bill. But we've actually set this up from the onset to say, let's try and be as as independent from government as we can, but also being able to work with the government where it makes sense as well. So yes, it's interesting discussions with the Treasury and MSD and so forth, but we need to pick up the ball and we need to run with this.
Simon speaking. Thank you very much, Herman. I think that's a wonderful place to leave it there. All I can do is encourage our viewers to reach out if you are in the Auckland, North, Rodney area, and if you are further abroad and somewhere else in the country, please don't hesitate. If you're interested in the ideas that Herman is trying to bring to life, the intention is for Harikoa to have their fingerprints across New Zealand entirely in due time, and I'm sure that will be the case eventually. So please don't be shy, get in touch. As he said, the research is incredibly important. He wants to hear from you and learn about what you need, what your disabled loved one needs in terms of living a good life over the rest of their life ahead. So yeah, thank you very much, Herman. Any final words before we say goodbye for the evening?
Well, I think from my side, again, thank you so much for your time, Simon, and for people participating in this. But you're right. I think as a parting note, although we're starting with the launch in the Rodney area, and that was also based on some lessons that we learned of where to go. But the aim of this whole initiative is to get a model that works very well, that we can replicate in other areas as well. Again, so that we can work together as a community. So yeah, so wherever you are, it'd be nice to hear from you. The research, the detailed discussion is more for people in the Northern Auckland, Rodney area, but even wherever you are, it'd be nice just to share some ideas if we can.
Simon speaking. Wonderful. Thank you again, Herman. It's been a pleasure. I'm sure we'll see you again on the live stream very shortly. Thank you to everyone who tuned in and watched. I hope you found it valuable. We will see you again in 2 weeks' time, where we will have Alistair from MSD. He is talking to us about the ongoing community consultation that is going until the end of July. So please, you don't want to miss that one. I will see you in 2 weeks' time on the 7th of July. Have a lovely evening. I'll see you again. Ka kite. And we're clear.